Now drifting in from the North Sea, so some sea threat affecting parts of eastern Scotland and eastern northeastern England. Low cloud, some murky conditions here. Further south and west, clearer skies, but I am expecting some mist and fog patches to develop. And temperatures, again, not dropping a huge amount, so it's likely to be another relatively warm night for most of us. As we go through Wednesday itself, a slow, murky start then for some eastern, northeastern parts, but that low cloud should gradually burn back towards the coast for most. The exception perhaps around eastern parts of Scotland. I am expecting the low cloud here to linger well into the afternoon. Otherwise, yes, it may be a touch cloudier than some recent days, but plenty of sunshine to be had, and temperatures could be even higher still, with highs around 32 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Gillian Keegan's in trouble for getting caught out in the interview yesterday when the cameras were still rolling. I'm not sure ethically whether that was the right thing for the ITV to do, to release that.
I think it was, if you remember the big row Gordon Brown got into over Gillian. That wasn't Gillian, wasn't it? Gillian Duffy, that bigoted woman in Rochdale.
Yeah.
But the big problem is still thousands of schools potentially have the same concrete problem, and parents don't know which ones they are.
Yeah, if you are one of those people, please get in touch with us this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com. We want to know how you're being affected by that, and a lot more this morning.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Morning, it's 9:30 on Tuesday, the 5th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Potty mouth Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, is fighting to keep her job after this interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No signs of...
No, Secretary of State, nobody does say you've done a good job because you blooming well haven't. Sticking plaster approach, that's what the spending watchdog has called the government's response to the concrete crisis. We're going to bring you all the latest.
Simon Byrne resigns. The Police Federation of Northern Ireland wants a full investigation into the actions of the former Chief Constable. We'll let you know all the details of that.
And time to ban vapes. That's the way France is heading as they plan to outlaw disposable vapes. Should we follow their lead and do the same? I think the vapes are an interesting story. The French minister bringing this in, she says vapes are a gateway for young people into smoking. We know they're there to try and woo people off smoking. Go to a vape shop, look at the flavours.
They should be prescription only, in my opinion. If it's meant to get you off cigarettes, then let's do that.
Yeah.
They are targeted to children, it is working. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email, as always, particularly if your kids are going to be affected, and you're going to be affected, maybe your grandchildren, by these school closures. Do get in touch this morning. First of all, though, here's Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak and Gillian Keegan are under growing pressure over the crumbling concrete crisis, which has fully or partially closed schools across the UK. It's after the Education Secretary was forced to apologise for using expletive language while expressing her frustration at the way in which the situation has been dealt with. Well, she'll face the rest of her cabinet later this morning as the Prime Minister assembles his team for their first meeting since returning from the Commons summers recess. It also comes as yesterday saw some big changes within office, with several figures given new roles. Among the big changes, Angela Rayner is the new Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, and Pat McFadden is National Campaign Coordinator, as well as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Retail sales rose in August as customers splurged on self-care. Total retail sales in the UK were up 4.1% on last August, above the three-month average of 3.6%. That's according to the British Retail Consortium. Health, beauty and food and drink were the strongest performing categories. And the hottest temperatures of the year could be seen this week. The Met Office is predicting maximum temperatures of 32 degrees tomorrow and Thursday, potentially matching the year's record during the heatwave in June. It says the UK Health Security Agency issued a yellow alert across the whole of England, apart from the northeast from yesterday afternoon until Sunday night. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So Gillian Keegan is fighting to keep her cabinet position this morning after she apologised for claiming that she was doing a bleeping good job whilst unaware that she was being recorded.
And why didn't she not know she was being recorded? Because the camera was right in front of her, the microphone was still on. They said, if you could just stay there, Secretary of State, while we take a few more shots. Idiot.
I mean, look, the reason I'm smiling is because...
Yeah, but for the grace of God.
Do you know what I mean? We have occasionally been caught out on this channel.
But we are not Secretary of State for Education at a time when schools are being closed again, thrusting children and families back into a lockdown scenario. And last week we discover, where was the Secretary of State for Education? Oh, she was on holiday in Spain, at one of her 2 houses in Spain. I'm very thrilled she's got 2 houses in Spain. But she was working from Spain. Oh, that's all right. My newspaper yesterday on the front page, raging about the fact civil servants are allowed to work from the beach.
She did.
Secretary of State for Education,
She did
working
come
from
home.
Spain during a crisis.
Didn't she come home, though, because of this, from one of her 2 houses that you sound delighted that she has?
Yeah, I'm very pleased she's got
home,
them.
didn't she?
She did, eventually.
Well, anyway, now, you can see we're still talking about this. We want you to get involved with this as well this morning. But now the National Audit Office has accused the government of using what they're calling a sticking plaster approach to school maintenance, with thousands of children currently unable to return to lessons.
The Shadow Paymaster General, that's his new title in the Labour Party's shadow cabinet reshuffle, Jonathan Ashworth, he spoke to GB News earlier this morning, had this to say.
We had a programme for rebuilding schools, and as I say, after 13 years ago, when the Conservatives first got in 13 years ago, they cut that programme. And I think today, look, when you've got sort of roofs at risk of collapse in various schools across the country, pupils really worried. You've got the Education Secretary expecting to be thanked and congratulated by parents. And then, of course, when you step back, it's not just the schools, you know, air traffic control was in a shambles last week, our rivers are full of sewage, our hospitals can't cope with the backlog for treatment. Nothing works in this country after 13 years. It really is time for change.
So let's speak to Civil Engineer and Director of Blue Light Management, Malcolm Hankey now. Good morning, Malcolm. Hi, great to see you. Right, we want to understand this from a structural point of view. We've never been so interested in concrete as we are this week. But tell us, first of all, how would a head know if this was in their schools?
Well, the head per se wouldn't necessarily know unless they'd had an expert come in and undertake a survey. Predominantly, the first port of call would be for a structural engineer to come in and do a visual survey of the building. I think that's what the government have done, is they've issued questionnaires to schools. I don't know if the schools are actually having to employ people to come in to do the surveys themselves before a structural engineer comes in to identify whether they've got RAC in the first instance. But then it would be, as I said, initially it would be a visual inspection by a professional who would ascertain whether there's been any obvious structural damage, and that could be cracking or it could be spalling of the concrete.
So what's changed then, Malcolm? Because we've known about this situation with RAC in public buildings since 1994. 1999, there was a major report in 2007 suggesting it should be removed from public buildings. 2018, again, the government was told there was a pandemic then which ensued the next couple of years when they could have gone into schools and fixed some of these situations. But this Education Secretary, she says it changed, the advice changed this summer. So what changed? Why would it suddenly have become such a crisis?
I'll try to put it into sort of relatively simple to understand terms, because it's quite a technical issue. But this type of material, this RAC, the aerated concrete, if you liken it to an aero chocolate bar, it's got very much the same properties as regular concrete, but it's not as dense and it's not as durable. The issue with these concrete panels is they're fabricated off-site and then brought to site. So it's a very quick and very cheap way of constructing, certainly roofs in the first instance. Now, it became very popular post-war, so certainly late 50s, 60s, 70s and into the 80s as well. As I said, as a very quick and efficient way of constructing public buildings. So that obviously that'll be schools and colleges in the first instance, but could be as widespread as court buildings. It could include hospitals as well. We don't, as it stands yet, we don't yet know the full impact. But obviously, if we're focusing on the building stock, the issue with this particular product is it was thought to perform as well as your traditional concrete material. Used in a roof, you would normally construct the roof structure and then you would overlay that with a waterproof membrane to provide the water tightness. Obviously, over time, you would get issues where that waterproof membrane may deteriorate or it may become damaged and water will get in. So then this particular form of concrete is quite porous. So where you would normally have a concrete structure that would literally retain the water on the surface, this allows water to penetrate through the concrete material itself. And then the other thing with this is you've got a reinforced steel within the concrete as well to give it its strength. Once water gets inside the concrete, that then starts to corrode the steel that's inside, which then causes structural damage and structural failure of each of these individual panels. So that's when a visual inspection takes place. You would see obvious signs of deterioration or damage, where you would see obvious cracking within the surface of the concrete panel as you look up at the roof, as an example. The problem with this particular material is it isn't always evident that structural damage is there. Under normal circumstances with concrete, you would see an obvious crack. With this type of concrete, it isn't necessarily always visually obvious that there's structural deterioration. So that's why they're in a position now where we've had issues where schools have been inspected. I can only assume that the obvious visual evidence wasn't there, but then we've had significant failure where these panels have collapsed inside the school.
And this moisture, is this heavy rain is making these roofs worse, Malcolm?
It could be, yeah, it could be. So as I said, predominantly they're used in roof structures. So you're going to obviously get rainfall on top of the roof, and you would normally have a weatherproof membrane that prevents that rain and moisture from entering into the structure. But over time, because these buildings are 30, 40, 50 years old, you're obviously going to get damage. One of the other issues that I think they're finding is you do get a lot of interventions happening. So schools may come in and decide that they want a skylight putting into the roof, or they may be putting air handling units to deal with the ventilation system on top of the roof and adding additional weight to the structure as well, which again can cause issues. You then tend to see failure where they've constructed holes through it predominantly.
And how easy is it, Malcolm? You said this concrete comes in panels. How easy is it to fix an area that might be crumbling? Do you just take off a panel and put some bricks in place, or do you have to take down whole walls, whole roofs? How massive is the maintenance job?
The initial intervention, I think, predominantly is to depends on the size of the room, obviously the height of the ceiling, but the initial intervention is to construct some internal support underneath the roof, which would predominantly be a timber structure. So you'd put some additional beams in and then put effectively you'd underlay timber underneath the roof panels to prevent them from falling. Obviously, depends how serious it is. For the more severe cases, you'd obviously then look to replace panels, but obviously that would mean removing the roof in its entirety. So you've really got, I think what's going to happen is you're going to have to take each individual school or each individual room on a case-by-case basis to see how severe the issue is. And then obviously the remediation that's needed will then follow dependent upon, as I said, how extreme the damage is or how extreme the structural failure is.
Would they have known when these bricks were put in that it had a very limited lifespan?
They knew that at the time when it was, I think it was a Swedish product originally that when it came over to the UK, and I think the BRE has done some investigations in terms of its lifespan, and I think they determined it had normally a 30-year lifespan. But what I would say is that pretty much every construction material that you use, even nowadays, has got a lifespan associated with it. So you do have to build in a contingency and a contingency fund for replacement of certain elements of building structure. So if you take cladding as an example, cladding has got a lifespan. If you take other issues in terms of flooring, and we've got all these PFI contracts that are going ahead with schools and hospitals and everything at the moment, where you've got certain maintenance regimes in place for certain elements that have to be replaced over time. That's just how construction works. It just seems that I think a lot of funding obviously is levelled at maintenance, but that funding is finite, so it can only go a certain, can only stretch a certain way.
Very briefly,
from my perspective,
Malcolm, very briefly, is it a fair criticism to say that the government or local education authorities were asleep at the wheel here?
I wouldn't say so, because there has been, I do know that the local authorities have been undertaking a series of inspections on these schools to assess the risk. So obviously what they've been doing is categorising from let's say a scale of 1 to 5. And for those that are severe, they're the schools that obviously have been shut in recent weeks on the basis of the issues that have happened with the failure that we've seen.
OK. Malcolm Hankey, the world's most interesting man when it comes to concrete. Who knew that it could be such a fascinating topic? I genuinely could have just had you on for the whole 2.5 hours. I felt like I learnt a lot. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on. Now, Simon Byrne has resigned as Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland with immediate effect.
That's right. The resignation was accepted after a series of controversies, including data leaks of members of staff.
We're going to cross live to our GB News Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, big moment to lose the Chief Constable.
Well, it is, and last Thursday he attended the policing board in the centre of Belfast and said, I will not be resigning. And he was very, very adamant that that was not going to happen. Then comes the weekend, he's had a chance to read the room, he's had a chance to really take in stuff in and around the Police Federation, and he's basically decided to say, well, it's time to go, and that's exactly what he's done. It is a hard line. It's a hard job for anybody, is the police service of Northern Ireland. Probably the most difficult policing job in Europe, because you have political masters, which is in the policing board. Then you have your chief constable with his own management board, and then below that you have the Police Federation. That's your rank and file members. And of course, under the Good Friday Agreement, the policing board was there to make sure that there was no political interference and everything was as neutral as possible. Well, of course, that line has seemed to be breached under a judicial review, and worse than that, the Police Federation had to take that judicial review themselves, so now they don't have exactly the biggest amount of faith inside the policing board either. So it is a problem for policing, but it's also a very serious problem politically for what lies ahead in Northern Ireland. And today he was due to brief the Northern Ireland Select Affairs Committee, and of course he won't be doing that now. That is underway as we speak. Liam Kelly, the head of the Federation, is first up to be questioned, and it is strange actually just watching it. The SDLP representative Claire Hanna has asked that the policing board be brought to face the Northern Ireland Select Affairs Committee in public very, very shortly. So it really is quite strange how this is all going and where it will go next, especially if there's no government inside Northern Ireland at this moment in time. The Assistant Chief Constable Christopher Todd will be up this afternoon, we believe, and that will probably be the most interesting listening.
Okay, thank you so much, Dougie Beattie there in Northern Ireland. We want to hear from you this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com, especially if you're affected by the schools closures. Right, should we move on?
You should. Britain's energy bill is going to enter the Commons later today, and it's fueled divisions within the Tory party. Some MPs claim the amendments could hinder the government's net zero targets.
So we're joined now by Conservative MP for South Thanet, Craig McKinley. Good morning, Craig. Will this hinder the government's net zero targets? And how firmly set are those targets?
Well, I take a rather different view, of course, to the energy bill. I think it's a horrendous bill. It's 379 pages. There's 144 pages of amendments have been laid, many of them in my name. It's really a bill of yesteryear. This was sort of founded on Boris, and he'd certainly drunk the Kool-Aid on many of these environmental issues, and not helped, of course, by the statutory instrument laid by Theresa May in her term of office, which created this 100% commitment to net zero by 2050. But this is a truly horrific bill. It allows all sorts of intrusive powers, Whitehall to tell you exactly what you must and mustn't do. I mean, I would rather it was scrapped and we start again. There's bits in there about new regulators for carbon capture and storage. Well, that's all very well. Why not let's just have a very simple bill discussing carbon capture and storage? This has become what I call a Christmas tree bill with all sorts of baubles all over it. But now this one, Andrew and Bev, this will make your hair curl. I'm particularly concerned about clause 248. It's helpfully called sanctions, so you know what's in it. Let me just read out what I find completely offensive. Under section 2, there are civil penalties up to £15,000 for not doing the right thing on net zero. But this is even worse. In in subsection 3, energy performance regulations, not yet written. These will be statutory instruments in the future by ministers of the future. And we know that statutory instruments don't always get the proper attention, not like being on the floor of the House of Commons. But energy performance regulations may provide for criminal offences with imprisonment for up to 12 months.
What?
Now, I'm appealing to the Speaker to allow my amendment to actually take this out of the bill. Now, let me give you an example. I don't know about you, but I rather like Shawshank Redemption, a great film. It's in my top 10 list. Just imagine the old lags of the future, and they're discussing around the dinner table. Well, what are you in for? Oh, well, I did a benefit fraud of 50 grand, got 8 months. Or what about you? Oh, dangerous driving caused serious injury. I got 6 months. Well, what about you? Oh, well, I lost my business. Homes gone. Families disappeared. I had to put 20 people out of work, all because I didn't have the energy performance certificate required, and I got 12 months. I mean, I'm a conservative for freedom, not to put people in prison for not adhering to this new net zero religion. This is a horrific bill. It should be scrapped. It should be parked in the Lords if it gets there and never see the light of day again.
Craig, you work
As
with
you can
these.
tell, I don't like it very much.
Well, no,
out.
I love it. I love what you're saying here. But so you work with these people, you work with these MPs who, as you say, have drunk the Kool-Aid. I would say they've just been, as you say, part of the religion. It feels like the green agenda can feel like a cult, but it is a global cult, and they are not alone. There are politicians and prime ministers and presidents all across the world who believe in this. How do you rationalise their mindset when what they're talking about is so punitive to British people, but also just so dystopian in its theory when you see it written on a piece of paper? If you haven't got the right boiler, you might go to prison. Can you explain the mentality of the MPs who support that?
Well, I wish I could. Unfortunately, I think a lot of this came from MPs and politicians who are no longer with us, i.e. Boris. I mean, Boris had great strengths, but on the whole environmental issues, he went completely overboard. You know, the COP26 saddle, he rode it rather enthusiastically. But, you know, I always keep my discussions with ministers fairly private. I'm always one for discretion. But I do get the feeling that they've been given this menu. They don't know quite where it's come from. And from what I get, they don't really much like it. So we've got a new Secretary of State in Claire Coutinho. I don't know the cut of her cloth on issues, but she's laid a lot of amendments today. It's got to go to the Lords yet, where, you know, hopefully, just like the, you know, well, sadly, in some respects, the Kept Animals Bill, the Retained EU Law Bill, got completely changed in the House of Lords at its final offing. And I certainly hope this bill will go the same way. But, you know, we can have a discussion about banning cars. I'm opposed to that. Banning oil boilers in 2 years or two and a bit years' time. I'm opposed to that. We can have all these discussions about, you know, the fear factors, the climate change, the fires in Rome, whatever you like. But we represent 1% of global CO2. You've got developing nations around the world are going hell for leather for cheap energy to get industrial growth and to bring their populations out of poverty. But we are going the opposite way. And this energy bill, you know, with new heat areas, which would allow the regulators to come into your home for any purpose. There is some very serious, nasty language in this bill, and I want it stripped out, and hopefully this bill parked, and we can think about this again rather more rationally in terms of costs, outcomes, practicality, what it means to the UK economy, because sadly this energy bill does not do it.
We'd love to talk to you a lot more about this, Craig, because there's many things. Just very briefly, tell me what you think about the idea it's going to be much easier now to build a wind turbine onshore. But also we've got to ask you about these devastating headlines on just about every front page. Concrete crisis on the front of the Telegraph. Tories have put sticking plaster on risky concrete, the Times. My own paper, the Daily Mail, one of the more loyal papers, says it's all about what it's just calling a shambles. It's a shambles. This government is in complete chaos, isn't it?
Well, I think it's been very unlucky with the you know, the RAC issue. This could have landed on anyone's lap, either the previous government, this government, or the next government.
Yeah, but they have had quite a few warnings, Craig.
Well, we have. I mean, what I cannot understand is how on earth any building reg, any assessor, when these buildings were put up 30, 40, 50 years ago, could have thought that this compound, with a known short longevity of 30, 40, 50 years, could ever have been used. Now, I understand, Andrew, and this is quite interesting. I'd like to know where this debate is going in Germany, because their post-war rebuild is full of this stuff, even more than we've got. But one thing I'm a little bit, you know, sorry really for the Secretary of State where she's landed in the chair, is that the local authorities, the local education authorities, the Academy Trust, they should know their buildings rather more than central government and Whitehall knows best. I don't understand why they haven't been alerted to this themselves, said, yeah, we've got a problem here. We know it's a 40-year life stuff. We've got problems. We'll put the grant application into the Department for Education for a rebuild. That bit of the puzzle doesn't seem to be done. But you're quite right, Andrew. This country yields up liabilities every day of the week.
We're against
All
the
right.
clock. We could talk to you for a lot
Craig
longer.
McKinley.
My new favourite MP, Craig McKinley, Conservative MP for Thanet.
And I never
Lots
got
more
to
to
talk
come
to you
this
about
morning.
wind turbines
Crumbling
either.
school crisis. This is Britain's Newsroom, the People's Channel.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. There is a little bit of mist and fog to watch out for first thing this morning, but once that clears, there'll be plenty of hot sunshine around, although watch out for some strong winds in the southwest. Taking a look at the details, and yes, once any mist and fog clears away, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the bulk of the UK, the exception perhaps being the far north of Scotland, where there is a front lingering here, bringing a bit of cloud and perhaps a few spots of drizzly rain as well. Otherwise, lots of sunshine. Watch out for some strong blustery winds in the southwest. Now, they will take the edge off the temperatures a little bit, but for many it's going to be a little bit hotter than it was yesterday, highs around 31 Celsius towards the southeast. Later on today, we are going to see some low cloud drifting in from the North Sea, so some sea threat affecting parts of eastern Scotland and eastern northeastern England. Low cloud, some murky conditions here. Further south and west, clearer skies, but I am expecting some mist and fog patches to develop. And temperatures, again, not dropping a huge amount, so it's likely to be another relatively warm night for most of us. As we go through Wednesday itself, a slow, murky start then for some eastern northeastern parts, but that low cloud should gradually burn back towards the coast for most. The exception perhaps around eastern parts of Scotland. I am expecting the low cloud here to linger well into the afternoon. Otherwise, yes, it may be a touch cloudier than some recent days, but plenty of sunshine to be had, and temperatures could be even higher still, with highs around 32 Celsius.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
That environment bill, we're going to return to that. But still to come, should we follow France's lead and ban disposable vapes? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 5th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Potty-mouthed Gillian Keegan, that's the Education Secretary, fighting to keep her job after this interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
No signs of that. Sticking plaster approach. That's what the spending watchdog has called the government's response to the concrete crisis affecting our schools. We'll bring you the very latest.
And it's getting hot in here. Our South West reporter Jeff Moody's in Devon to tell us about the heatwave which is sweeping the nation.
Yes, who said summer was over? I'm here on Instow Beach in North Devon, where temperatures today are expected to be hotter than Ibiza.
Good, marvellous news. More good news, is it time to ban vapes? That's the way France is heading as they plan to outlaw disposable vapes. Should we do the same?
And we sort of got vapes, didn't we? Because they were supposed to woo people off smoking, but what they've turned into, so especially in France, a gateway for young people to smoke.
Teenagers, brilliant way for them to start becoming addicted to nicotine. What do you think? GB Views at gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, here's Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. We start with some breaking news. Discount retailer B&M has agreed to buy up to 51 Wilko stores from administrators for £13 million. It comes nearly a month after Wilko collapsed, putting thousands of jobs at risk across its 400 stores. We'll bring you more on this breaking story as we get it. The Education Minister says the government has been very proactive in dealing with the concrete crisis in schools. Nick Gibbs' comments come after the Education Secretary apologised for using strong language while expressing her frustration at the way in which the situation has been dealt with. Both Rishi Sunak and Gillian Keegan are under growing pressure as schools across the UK have fully or partially closed. Nick Gibb told us Gillian Keegan's comments were off the cuff.
She was frustrated by the fact that the Department for Education, the civil servants, have been working very hard in terms of dealing with RAC issue. We've been very proactive in dealing with RAC. Since 2018, we've issued very detailed guidance to responsible bodies. And these are the bodies that are legally responsible for school buildings, which are the local authorities, the academy trusts, diocese, but we provide them with the best advice based on the technical advice that we get about how to identify and monitor RAC.
Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says the Conservatives aren't working hard enough to solve the issue.
I think today, look, when you've got sort of roofs at risk of collapse in various schools across the country, pupils really worried. You've got the Education Secretary expecting to be thanked and congratulated, and parents across the country, teachers who work in schools, and pupils, because some of these pupils are old enough to understand what is going on, want you to fix this, and don't want any more of your saying, oh, nothing to do with me, Gov. That is, frankly, an abdication of your responsibilities.
The Prime Minister's chairing his first cabinet meeting today since before the summer recess. Meanwhile, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is also currently chairing his cabinet meeting. Yesterday saw some big changes within the Labour office, with several figures given new roles. Angela Rayner is the new Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and Levelling Up Secretary, and Pat McFadden is National Campaign Coordinator as well as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Retail sales rose in August as customers spending big on self-care products. Total retail sales in the UK were up 4.1% on last August, above the three-month average of 3.6%. That's according to the British Retail Consortium. Health, beauty, food and drink were the strongest performing categories. Now, Kim Jong-un could travel to Russia to meet President Vladimir Putin. The North Korean leader could make the trip as early as this month, near to the border between the two countries, believed to be a possible meeting point. It comes as the US claims the Kremlin is attempting to acquire military equipment for its war in Ukraine. Offenders are using virtual reality to groom and sexually abuse children, as well as share illegal images of abuse, according to new research from the NSPCC. It warned offenders are being desensitised to their own behaviour because of the anonymity such spaces provide through their use of digital avatars to represent each person present. The NSPCC has called on tech firms to do more to ensure virtual reality platforms are safe by introducing better child safety features and reporting systems. And finally, the hottest temperatures of the year could be seen this week. The Met Office is predicting maximum temperatures of 32 degrees tomorrow and Thursday, potentially matching the year's record during the heatwave in June. It says the UK Health Security Agency issued a yellow alert across the whole of England, apart from the North East, from yesterday afternoon until Sunday. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
We're just discussing the fact that Gillian Keegan is on the front page of every single newspaper this morning. She's fighting to keep her cabinet position. None of the pictures are terribly flattering.
No, and it depends which photograph you use, because she changed her dress quite a few times. Does she think that matters then?
Well, she always has a very nice blow dry. I've always thought that about Gillian Keegan. Not that that matters. We're under a lot of pressure, women, to look a certain way in the public eye. I get that. But I think I saw a side of her yesterday that I didn't particularly like at all when that mic was on. You might have seen it. She was doing an interview. The interview stopped and she said that she was doing a bleeping good job, unaware that she was being recorded.
And nobody was giving her sufficient gratitude. Fancy. How many schools have shut? 104, partially closed or closed completely. Another 2,000... we don't know yet, maybe closed, and she thought she should be praised. Yeah. She was on holiday last week in Spain. How lovely. She said she was working from home. Nice.
Well, now, the National Audit Office has accused the government of using a sticking plaster approach to school maintenance, with thousands of children unable to return to lessons.
Shadow Paymaster General, of course, there was a Labour Party reshuffle yesterday. It was rather dull. Jonathan Asworth, that's his new job. He spoke to GB News early this morning. This is what he had to say.
We had a programme for rebuilding schools, and as I say, after 13 years ago, when the Conservatives first got in 13 years ago, they cut that programme. And I think today, look, when you've got sort of roofs at risk of collapse in various schools across the country, pupils really worried. You've got the Education Secretary expecting to be thanked and congratulated by parents. And then, of course, when you step back, it's not just the schools, you know, air traffic control was in a shambles last week, there are rivers are full of sewage, our hospitals can't cope with the backlog for treatment. Nothing works in this country after 13 years. It really is time for change.
What is a Paymaster General?
Just look, they actually write the cheques on behalf of government departments. They sign them. So it's a symbolically important role.
Sounds
but actually, it's a non-job.
Is he like a secretary?
Yeah. He's gone from being a key member of the shadow cabinet to a ghost figure. He's minister without portfolio, really. So he'll pop up doing interviews. He'll meddle in interview, and he'll be sacked next time. And I speak as one who likes Jonathan Ashworth.
If Jonathan Ashworth woke up this morning feeling really proud of his new job, Andrew Pearce has just
demolished it. It's not a job. Not a real job. You could do without it. There are now 3 members in Labour's Cabinet Office job. bit crowded.
Some would say we don't do proper jobs anyway either. But anyway, let's cross live to GB News South East reporter Ellie Costello.
Who does a really proper job.
She's outside Buckhurst Hill Community Primary School in Essex. Ellie, is this a school that has been affected by the concrete chaos?
Yes, it's one of the 104 schools in the country that is partially or fully closed due to this rack concrete crisis. You can see behind me, the car park is actually packed full of cars, and that's because the teachers are still very much coming to work. They're working around the clock to try and find alternative teaching arrangements for the pupils. They, the students, are on an extended summer break. The start of term has been delayed until next Monday, whilst the teachers behind me desperately try and find other places in which those pupils can be taught, because this building behind me has been deemed unsafe. We have just had a statement through from the school. We did ask to interview them this morning. That has been denied, but I have got this statement saying that 8 of the 14 classrooms behind me have been deemed unsafe, including as well the staff room, the dining hall and the children's toilets. So it looks as though what's going to happen is, starting from next Monday, half of the classes are going to be taught in the classrooms that are safe, and the rest of those classes are going to be moved to a different school within the trust, which doesn't have this rack concrete, and those pupils are going to be taught elsewhere in a different school, and those arrangements will start from next Monday. So that just gives you an idea of the scramble that the teachers, the schools and the parents have had to go through since they found out that the building was unsafe since last Thursday. They really haven't had very long. Meanwhile, criticism for Gillian Keegan, the Education Minister, those comments yesterday saying she wasn't getting enough praise for the hard work that she's done. Also criticism that she was on holiday when this crisis started to unfold. So criticism for her, there is that pressure mounting on her in that cabinet position, and questions remain as to how many schools this affects, how long this is going to take to fix, and the big million-dollar question at the moment, how much is this all going to cost?
OK, thank you, Ellie. Ellie Costello. They're outside one of the many schools that is affected.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking to a teacher in just a moment, but your emails have been coming in, and I just want to read you this one from Kay. My daughter phoned me in a distressed state on Thursday. She had an email stating that Hatfield Junior School will be closed due to dangerous concrete. My 7-year-old granddaughter was due to go into juniors today. She started school a few months before the pandemic, and due to the lockdown, she's been left with crippling anxiety over germs and health. We've spent the 6 weeks of the holiday preparing her for going back to school, and we've now got to explain that there's another danger preventing her from going. Listening to my beautiful 7-year-old granddaughter, she's scared she's going to die from the anxiety pains in her chest. It's literally quite heartbreaking. When are the politicians in this country going to stop self-congratulating and start putting our children first? Thank you so much. That is a brilliant email, Kay, and it's exactly what we've done.
And there was a report on another channel done by the reporter who interviewed Gillian Keegan, who then lost her rag when she was still on mic, back in March, warning that there were literally hundreds of schools impacted by this crumbling concrete. Now, to be fair to this government, it was first discovered in 1994. John Major was Prime Minister. 1999... Blair was Prime Minister. 2007, Blair was Prime Minister. 2018, Theresa May Prime Minister. They knew there was a big problem. They didn't do anything about it. Rishi Sunak, we know, was told in 2021 he didn't give enough money. And then this year, finally, they've realised... But they've had months to get to grips with it.
I know.
Why does it take till 3 days before that we go back to school?
Well, Jill is watching. Morning, Jill. She said, Andrew, stop having a go at Gillian. She's actually doing... She says Jill. I presume it's not Gillian. She's actually doing something where no other secretary has. Just another opportunity to have a go at the Tories. Labour have done nothing and haven't raised it at all. Just let her do her job. That's about Gillian.
Well, I think Labour...
From Jill.
Labour have raised it, but Labour did nothing about it when they were in government. Nothing at all. And, of course, when the school building programme was cancelled, or repair programme was cancelled in 2010 by the Tories...
That was the coalition, wasn't it? That was Cameron and Nick Clegg.
The government had run out of money. Remember, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury left the note saying, sorry, I've spent all the money.
The coffers are empty, yeah. Now, let's get the thoughts of maths teacher and broadcaster Bobby Seagull. Morning, Bobby. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know that you were quite busy on the media during lockdowns when all the kids were homeschooling, and teachers have had to be resilient, haven't they, and find ways to make this work. But what do they do now? It's the last thing the kids and the schools need.
To be honest, I have sort of deeper sympathies for schools and teachers and parents and children involved in this. Fortunately, my own school, we were sort of on the new build post 2014, so we're fine. But I know of friends who are teachers, head teachers, who've had to make the really difficult decision early this week of having to close down their schools, thinking about online learning. And we know that teachers did their best to deliver online lessons in lockdown, but the reality is students don't learn best in that environment. So the students out there learning at home, it's, again, we've had COVID, we've had, again, teacher strikes, and now adding this to that, this generation of young people, their education is really, really, really challenging.
And the colleagues you've talked to, Bobby, head teachers, teachers in schools which are affected by this, had they been worried for some time that they may be impacted by this concrete?
So it's an issue that, again, I think in 2018, the government advised schools with the RAAC to put in contingency measures. But it's only 2022 that they then sent out a questionnaire to say to schools, can you really assess the level of risk? And I think for schools, it's the late response of the government. So again, I think it's last Thursday, Andrew, you mentioned, it's 3 days before school starts, when schools will then issue the guidance, actually, if you've got this serious level of RAAC, you must close down. And I think the question is, of course, we can't just blame one government. It's been, again, 50s and 60s. We've had this sort of concrete, and, you know, the 90s and the noughties, people have raised this issue. It's why have they left it to the Thursday before school starts? They had the whole summer to raise the alarm bells. And again, if it had been in the first couple of weeks of the summer term, then schools have the time to react, respond, prepare. It's that lateness which suggests incompetence.
Bobby, you may not like this question, but during the pandemic, we saw some very kind of, some, not all, but some lazy lefty Lib Dem Labour teachers shouting on the lockdowns because they wanted to cause more sort of political mayhem and say, look what this government is doing. Are we seeing the same thing now?
So in terms of, like, of course, back then, like, we've had issues about strikes and teacher pay, and that's about thinking about making sure we have the best workforce retained and attracted to the profession. Now, I think a lot of teachers are upset because why do people become teachers, Bev? Because we think we want to pass on our skills and knowledge to the next generation. But this issue is, I think, a really serious one, because when we think about, again, and refer to the Grenfell tragedy, this cladding issue was sort of partially known, but it takes one tragedy and then everyone, there's accountability, who are the ministers in charge. And I think with schools, I'm glad at least now people are thinking, actually, we can't just continue like this, but it's one of the issues that could get out of hand.
There'll be some teachers, though, Bobby, who will be going, oh, brilliant. I didn't want to go back. I've had 6 weeks off. The sun is coming out this week. I'm going to sit in the garden. And suddenly, rather than having a can-do attitude and going, right, we've got to fix this, we need porta cabins, we need surveys, we need builders, heads like that. There will be some heads who see this as just another nice, lovely extension of that first lockdown in March 2020, won't there?
Oh, no, I think that's an unfair characterization, Bev. Because, again, teachers, we've had, 5-6 weeks of summer. Most teachers, pretty much all teachers, are looking forward to seeing their students again for the new school year. And again, I think it's a question of, from the government, the timing of the communication. Had it been week 1, week 2, head teachers who are responsible for their local communities could have had time to respond and prepare. And again, as an individual, I'm a maths teacher. My job isn't to worry about the maintenance and the repair of the school. My job is to make sure I've got my lesson plans ready. But the head teachers, they're the ones who are responsible for this. But again, communication of this should have been earlier for this issue.
Well, Bobby, if they are looking forward to seeing the kids again, does that mean teachers are not going to go on strike anymore?
Well, hopefully now the government has resolved the pay issue. And again, maybe in a few years we may need to think about it again. But for now, the pay issue has been resolved, thankfully.
Very relieved to hear it.
Thank you so much, maths teacher, broadcaster Bobby Siegel there. Thank you for your time. Your emails coming in. David said, interestingly, the fault is always the person currently in the post. Yet the truth is that other people have left well alone. Labour complained they had this wonderful building and repair programme. Yet when they left office with good luck, there's no money left, what you were saying, Andrew. Yeah. Things had to be looked at and cost savings made. Follow up a pandemic when so many got used to having money for nothing to cover the period of not having to go to their job.
What's going to be a problem for the government is if some report is leaked which shows that they were warned potentially these schools were posing a danger to the children and those warnings weren't heeded. Now, I don't know if that report exists, but there was a civil servant who was... The BBC didn't mention the fact he was fired from his job because he screwed up COVID and A-levels, but he was on the BBC yesterday blaming Rishi Sunak for ignoring those sort of warnings, but didn't produce any evidence to underpin it. And you thought the BBC might have mentioned that he had an axe to grind because he was fired.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
Of course they wouldn't.
Funny that.
Still to come, though, this morning, could banning vapes increase the uptake of smoking cigarettes? My inbox has been very busy with you getting in touch about this already. We're going to be looking at that in just a moment. This is Britain's News Channel. It's GB News.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. There is a little bit of mist and fog to watch out for first thing this morning, but once that clears, there'll be plenty of hot sunshine around, although watch out for some strong winds in the southwest. Taking a look at the details, and yes, once any mist and fog clears away, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the bulk of the UK, the exception perhaps being the far north of Scotland, where there is a front lingering here, bringing a bit of cloud and perhaps a few spots of drizzly rain as well. Otherwise, lots of sunshine. Watch out for some strong blustery winds in the southwest. Now, they will take the edge off the temperatures a little bit, but for many it's going to be a little bit hotter than it was yesterday, highs around 31 Celsius towards the southeast. Later on today, we are going to see some low cloud drifting in from the North Sea, so some sea threat affecting parts of eastern Scotland and eastern northeastern England. Low cloud, some murky conditions here. Further south and west, clearer skies, but I am expecting some mist and fog patches to develop. And temperatures, again, not dropping a huge amount, so it's likely to be another relatively warm night for most of us. As we go through Wednesday itself, a slow murky start then for some eastern northeastern parts, but that low cloud should gradually burn back towards the coast for most. The exception perhaps around eastern parts of Scotland. I am expecting the low cloud here to linger well into the afternoon. Otherwise, yes, it may be a touch cloudier than some recent days, but plenty of sunshine to be had, and temperatures could be even higher still, with highs around 32 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:24 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner, and lots of emails and texts coming in. Engineer Brian says, this concrete should have been tested along with all other products by the British Building Research Station in Watford. What was their advice when contracts were awarded?
Good point. As I said, who knew concrete could be this fascinating? Colin from Sunderland has said, hi, she should not resign for telling the truth. This is, of course, Gillian Keegan, who is on the front page of every single newspaper this morning. It shows how human she is and angry. Good for her. How many just ignored the problem? Also, why would anyone build something with a 30-year shelf life?
But they did.
They did.
It was cheap. And a lot of this stuff was built after the war, of course. And we're going to be talking about vapes, but already people are sending in messages about vapes. Alan from Aldershot says, Kathy says, my brother lives in Holland. Alan from Aldershot says, apart from the health issues, what about the fact these disposable vapes get dumped all over our town centre streets? Alan, you're absolutely... They're everywhere.
Yeah, he says this is a sign of how this awful habit has taken a grip. It has taken a grip that everybody, I think, is underestimating.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're talking about this because France is banning the disposable vapes. And that's what Alan's talking about.
Yes, he is.
They smoke them, the kids, some adults.
And sling them.
Chuck them. They just think it's like, don't know, like a lollipop stick or something.
Well, let's not forget those images from the Reading Festival last week where they abandoned their tents and abandoned their rubbish, left it all there. That is generation
Z.
Just Stop Oil.
Generation wasteful, it seems.
Yeah, lecturing us. I never cause litter.
No.
Do you?
No, I stop people on the street if I see them drop litter. I do. I am that person who says, excuse me, you've dropped something. I do it politely, but make a point.
And just hope they don't punch you.
So far, so
it's a factor. It's a factor.
Well, look, a surprise heat wave, yay, has hit the UK with temperatures set to soar to 32 degrees.
It means that we're going to be hotter than Ibiza. Get that. Our Southwest reporter, Jeff Moody, is at Inslow Beach in Devon for us in his bathers.
Sadly not.
Sadly not. I did think about wearing shorts because, of course, you wouldn't see it. But no, I've chickened out in the end, so I'm fully clothed beneath. But what a beautiful day. Thank you for this gig. A whole day on Instow Beach in North Devon. Well, we've been praying and hoping, haven't we, for an Indian summer. Here it is. Temperatures getting up to 32 degrees in places today. So it's officially hotter than Ibiza. That's good news. Of course, there's a weather warning in place, a yellow weather warning, which means that if you're elderly or you're vulnerable or you're susceptible to the heat, then do take extra care. But interestingly, there's also we're also going to have some tropical nights on Wednesday and Thursday. They're saying that the temperature won't get below 20 degrees Celsius, so it's going to be a balmy tropical night on Wednesday and Thursday. Great for this time of year. They're also saying at the Met Office that the sunsets are going to be particularly spectacular over the next few days. That's to do with Saharan dust from the Sahara Desert that's heading this way. And apparently, I don't know the full scientific meteorological explanation as to why, but it's going to make the sunsets particularly bright, particularly vibrant this week. So, fantastic news, of course, for the tourist industry that had such a bad summer, didn't it? I mean, July was a total washout. August was interchangeable. Tourist numbers were down up to 20% here in Devon. So a lot of tourist businesses, cafes, shops and restaurants and amusement arcades have been really relying on what they call the shoulder period, which is now September and early October. They need that period to be good in order to sustain their business through the winter months. So hopefully it will continue to be good. There's mixed forecasts as to how long this is going to last. If you look at one forecast, it says that we've got this weather for the rest of September. That'll be nice, won't it? But that particular forecast is a bit of a lone voice. Most people are saying that it's going to be at this sort of level until 9 p.m. on Sunday, and then the temperatures are going to dip considerably and then hover around the average. Who wants average, eh?
Jeff, I want to know if you've got your sunblock on, and if so, what factor, because it's very hot there.
I haven't got any sunblock on yet. I really need to go and get some, don't I? No, I have no sunblock at all.
You're getting a good dose of vitamin D instead, Jeff. That's also good for you in small doses. Don't burn yourself.
I am,
Jeff Moody there at Instow Beach in North Devon. You know, my son...
Look glorious?
Gorgeous. That's not a million miles away from Croyd Beach. My son is called Croyd after Croyd Beach down in Devon.
Did he thank you for naming him after a beach?
He's all right about it. There is one other. There is another Croyd in the country. He's not the only one.
It's a glorious part of the country.
It's amazing. It's so beautiful down there. You have been very busy getting in touch with us this morning. We're going to be talking about vaping in just a moment. And Kathy has said, my brother lives in Holland. All the plastic bottles have a deposit charge. The bottles are then returned to the store through a machine where it reads the barcode to make sure it's purchased in the store. You get a voucher with your deposit. When I was a child, we collected our bottles to take back to the shops to get spending money. Why can't we do this? And she's talking about you're thinking, why is she talking about bottles when you're talking about vapes? But this is because the disposable ones are going to be banned in France for the sake of the planet. And I'm on board with this.
Why aren't they put in recycling plants? The disposable vapes?
I wonder if they may not be disposable because they will have a chemical element to them. It's not just like your plastic bottle that your salad your plastic that your salad has come in. I think we should be reducing plastics as much as possible. Plastics in the sea is the environmental issue that does keep me awake at night.
It is.
Right, so we are going to be talking about that.
Have you ever tried a vape?
No. Have you?
No. I used to smoke. I stopped when I was 40. And I'm very concerned about vapes, but we're going to have that conversation with somebody from the vape industry who, of course, say our concerns are all misplaced. Well, are they?
Well, first of all, though, here is your very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much. It's 10:30. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Education Minister says the government has been very proactive in dealing with the concrete crisis in schools. Speaking to GB News, Nick Gibbs' comments come after the Education Secretary apologised for using strong language whilst expressing her frustration at the way in which the situation has been dealt with. Both Rishi Sunak and Gillian Keegan are under growing pressure as schools across the UK have fully or partially closed. Well, Rishi Sunak's chairing his first cabinet meeting today since before the summer recess. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, also currently chairing his cabinet meeting. Yesterday saw some big changes within office, with several figures given new roles. Angela Rayner is the new Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and Levelling Up Secretary, while Pat McFadden is National Campaign Coordinator, as well as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Discount retailer B&M has agreed to buy up to 51 Wilko stores from administrators for £13 million. It comes nearly a month after Wilko collapsed, putting thousands of jobs at risk across its 400 stores. And retail sales rose in August as customers spending big on self-care products. Total retail sales in the UK were up 4.1% on last August, above the three-month average of 3.6%, according to the British Retail Consortium. Health, beauty, food and drink were the strongest performing categories. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2544 and 1.1666 euros. The price of gold is £1,541 and 6 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,442 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, Investments That Matter.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
10:36 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So the French Prime Minister, Elizabeth Borne, has announced plans to ban disposable vapes in a bid to curb smoking amongst youngsters.
Smoking kills around 75,000 people each year in France, but some people fear that a ban on single-use e-cigarettes will turn people to tobacco.
So should Britain follow suit, or could this backfire and increase smoking rates? Let's talk now to the Director General of the UK Vaping Association, John Dunn. Good morning, John. Good to see you again. I'm in awe of the fact that you keep coming on this show, giving what a beating up I give you every time I talk to you for the terrible damage that your industry is doing to our teenagers. Defend yourself. It's impossible to.
Well, first of all, young people shouldn't be vaping, as we continue to tell you. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to curb that through penalising retailers that sell to minors. Well, the fact of the matter is that vaping is the most popular way that adults give up smoking in the UK. And we have 220 people still dying every day from smoking-related diseases. So the idea of banning a product that saves lives is absolutely ridiculous.
John, can I interrupt you right there when you say young people shouldn't be smoking vapes? So why do you have flavours called bubblegum, marshmallow and candy? They're not aimed at 42-year-olds. They're aimed at teenagers or younger.
Well, I beg to differ. Adults like flavours.
No,
in
sorry,
fact,
John.
you know,
John, I don't buy that. I think
Well, I'm sorry.
we've got three parents here.
No, hang on a
They will
second.
not. I don't think they'll agree with you.
Right. Well, I'm 58 years of age and I enjoy gin, and I have two bottles of gin downstairs, one called bubblegum and one called strawberry candy floss. So I'm sorry, but adults like flavours, including people like myself.
Does any adult believe this?
We don't have candy floss flavoured gin, John. We might have grapefruit or rhubarb flavoured gin, but they're not marketed at children. You don't routinely buy gin that's Knickerbocker Glory flavoured like these vapes are.
You've lost the argument, mate.
Let's look specifically at
No,
this.
absolutely. You should look online. They are all over the place.
You've not convinced us.
But the thing is, you don't have to look online for the vapes because they're on the high street and they're next to sweet shops, John. They are marketed to children. They are next to these American candy shops. So come on, kids, you can buy your candy or you can have your nicotine in a device which might give you mouth cancer in 20 years. We just don't know yet.
Well, first of all, you raise a very good point about where these products are sold. And one of the things that we've called for is licensing of vape shops. Because you're right, they shouldn't be in candy shops. They shouldn't be in barber shops and pizza shops like I see every day. And this is why we're calling for the licensing of vape stores. And that has to include robust age verification processes. And we're also calling for fines of up to £10,000 per instance for any vape store or any vape dealer caught selling to minors. And right now, the fines are absolutely ridiculous. We have one store, for instance, about 4 weeks ago, that was fined £28 by a court for selling to a 14-year-old. Now, that's not right.
Listen, burglaries don't get fixed, don't get solved, and the police aren't fixing crimes such as, rapes and assaults. They are not going to waste their time going to knock on the door of a newsagent who sold a vape for a few quid to a 12-year-old. So you might as well just forget that. Just forget it. Stop using that as an excuse. If you go and look at any festival, this summer and see all the teenagers walking around vaping, what does it do to you? What does it do to your industry when you see that? Because the horse has bolted.
No, I absolutely disagree. And first of all, it's not the police's job to go and enforce this. It's trading standards. And one of the things that when I talk to trading standards is they are woefully underfunded. They don't have the resources to do this. And this is why we're calling for this licensing fee and for this fine who penalises those retailers who are breaking the law. That penalises them and provides much needed funds for trading standards to do more enforcement. That's the solution to this problem, not banning a product and creating a huge black market, which will be even worse.
OK, John, do you know what long-term damage the chemicals involved in vapes do to people's health?
I'm not a scientist, but if you listen to what public health...
Could you answer the question?
Yes, we know that vaping is at least 95% less harmful than smoking.
What about the long-term damage caused by the chemicals? John, go back to my question if you don't mind. Do you know the long-term damage?
If you give me a second to answer it.
Go on,
then. If you actually give me a second to answer it, I will.
Go on.
What we do know is we have well over 20 years of data, and all of the leading scientists in the UK that deal with tobacco harm control are all of the same opinion that compared to smoking, vaping is far less harmful for you to do. Absolutely.
But it isn't.
He hasn't answered the question.
I know
John, you haven't answered the question.
But they aren't. But this isn't about comparing it to smoking. You might say it's the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
But what vaping has allowed is a whole generation of children that were never going to smoke cigarettes because that was one of the biggest public health triumphs we've ever seen in this country, across the world. Tony Blair did a lot wrong, but banning smoking in public places was the one thing that he did right. It was gone. There was a generation that weren't into nicotine. And thanks to vaping, you've now got a whole new profitable generation coming through who may never smoke a cigarette, but they'll always smoke vapes if we're not careful as parents.
I think you really need to go and look at Action for Smoking Health's publication that they just brought out, the myth-busting around the misconceptions about vaping. And some of the interesting things they point out that, that vaping is neither more harmful nor addictive than smoking, and it's not a proven gateway to smoking. I would advise your listeners.
I agree with you. It isn't a gateway to smoking, but what it is, it's a gateway to a lifetime addiction to nicotine and vaping and spending money on something that these kids can't afford and don't need.
But the majority of vapers in this country are ex-smokers. In fact, the median age for a disposable... Hang on a second. The median age for a disposable user in this country is 36 years of age, and that's based on 5 million transactions.
John, just remind us, who owns most of the vape production? What companies own
independent vape
How many companies like British American Tobacco, how many vaping products do they own?
There's only about 2 tobacco companies that actually produce vaping products. The majority of vaping products are sold and marketed by independent companies, not tobacco companies.
Right.
John, I tell you, I admire the fact that you come on here and put up a defence. I really do. And, I think it's pretty clear where we both stand on this. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
And unable to say whether there are long-term damage caused to our health by the chemicals used in vape, which Nigel Nelson, who's
Nigel
here...
Nelson, Tonya Buxton.
Tonya wanted to shout at the skip, was shouting.
I thought you two were giving Troy a really hard time on that one.
Good, he deserves it.
Well,
so
hang on a sec.
Vaping, and you don't know what damage the chemicals are doing to your health.
No, but I also smoke, and
you do know what.
I do know that can do some damage. The whole point about vaping is, no, it's not for children. Children should not be vaping, and there should be that shops should be prevented from selling them.
I completely.
But as a quit smoking tool, it probably is the best thing that's been on the market.
Why are you still smoking as well, then?
Well, because I'm not very good at actually giving up the cigarettes.
I'm
rather overdoing it at the moment.
Can I just say, I've got teenagers, and so I completely agree. Nigel, you're an adult, do what you like. You know, that's fine.
Thank you.
But these vapes, my pleasure. These vapes are encouraging children, exactly as you said, young. I see them from 12 years old, vaping. They put it down their tops. They, it looks cool everywhere they go. They would never have smoked. So it's exactly what.
Well, you don't know that.
I do know that because smoking's antisocial and it stinks, and we don't want. Sorry, Nigel.
And parents
to be mean.
know. And parents know. Parents don't.
The point about vapes is you're absolutely right about we don't know what kind of long-term damage there is. If we did know, the NHS was poised to actually put vapes on prescription.
They should be.
As a quit smoking aid.
That I'm on board with.
They haven't done that because they don't know the long-term effects themselves.
So better stick with Nicorette, a tobacco substitute.
Which doesn't work.
They don't work?
Well, I don't think it works, no. I've tried...
You're an addict.
Well, absolutely. I've tried the gum, the patches, the whole bit. So, and I've given up smoking, I don't know, about a dozen times and gone back to it. I'm an expert giver-upper.
Well, so your children, teenagers, how would you... If they were vaping, what would be...
I'm not that parent.
Right.
I don't tolerate anything like that. That just wouldn't be tolerated. And actually, what I've also done is when kids have been in my house, they've had friends around and they're in the garden, I see a vape, I go up, I snap it and I put it in the bin.
Do you really?
Not on my property. I do. I am that parent. I will not tolerate... I'm a great parent. I'm liberal in many ways, but certain things, like putting toxic chemicals in your body after I've reared you and everything I've done for you, it's a no-go with me in my family.
And what do you about his idea that he doesn't know that bloke?
He knows nothing because he's clearly not with young people. He's not seeing... I see them. I see these kids. I see these girls, and they would never... Especially, it's very much a girl thing, actually, more than a boy thing.
It is?
Yeah. And they would never have touched cigarettes. But they are vaping. It's exactly as you said.
What did you think of his bogus explanation for he's got some gym which has got some strawberry vaping?
It's so disingenuous.
Marshmallow and bubblegum flavoured vapes are for kids.
It's so disingenuous. They are marketing the young with these flavours, and I really believe they should be totally banned. And the only flavour that there should be of a vape is nicotine flavour. That's it.
Right, let's move on to another story then. This is a big Labour reshuffle yesterday. Was it the kind of stuff that really got you floated your boat, Nigel Nelson? Was it an exciting day for you, a Labour reshuffle?
It was a bit curious egg and sort of good in parts. That I'm really pleased that the top people kept their jobs. Wes Streeting at Health, Yvette Cooper at Home, and so on. Bit disappointed to see Jonathan Ashworth be demoted.
He was on media around this morning, wasn't
he? Yeah, but exactly. I mean, the one thing is a great media performer.
It's a non-job, of course, isn't it?
Well, Paymaster General. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. If you look on the gov.uk website, when it says responsibilities, there's a blank space.
Yeah. And what was he before?
Before he was DWP.
Right. Okay. So that's
big job.
And before that, he was Health. So he had a and he was very
down and out.
Well, not really. I think that Jonathan, being Jonathan, he will do what he does best: go back on the media round, keep promoting the Labour Party, trying to fight for a Labour government. So he won't be distracted by this. Rosanna Allen Khan, I think, was unfortunate. She had the mental health brief.
She's a doctor who, in her spare time, does shifts in it.
That's right. She worked all the way through COVID, working as a hospital doctor.
But he sacked her.
Well, no, he didn't sack her. What in fact happened there was that he was going to demote her from cabinet level.
Right.
And in her resignation letter, what she said was, I'm really disappointed that you don't feel mental health should be a cabinet position. And I think she's right, that mental health is so important, it should be a cabinet position.
He wanted her out.
Well, I mean, that she would have stayed, but it would have been outside shadow cabinet.
Her, as you know, and Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary.
Well, inevitably, they were in the same kind of area. I think that she was very good. I'm really sorry to see that she disappeared. I'm sure she'll be back when Labour get into government.
What's happened to Lisa Nandy, who was running for the leadership a couple of years ago?
Well, I think this is where we get the sort of the Blairite bit from the reshuffle, that it was a very sort of Blair-type reshuffle. The soft left were pushed out. Lisa Nandy is soft left. She ends up with a demotion to international development, which, of course, she isn't even shadowing a department. It doesn't exist anymore. So, again, what she's obviously decided is, I'll get on with the job. Politics changes so quickly. I could well be back in cabinet again.
There's an election next year. She wants her red boxes.
Career.
She wants her red boxes in her ministerial car.
What this reshuffle does, for someone who's... I'm not political, I keep telling people that. I keep getting called right-wing, which astounds me. But it's that it's such a much of a muchness. And last night, I think Nigel was with Rees-Mogg, and they basically said there's no difference between Keir Starmer and Jeremy Hunt. They're the same thing. We don't have a party to choose from anymore with any real electoral choices. It's the same mush, and all of them do nothing apart from promote their own careers.
That's bleak, isn't it?
Is that fair?
Well, no. I mean, at the moment we've had 13 years of disaster.
Not 13.
Oh God! And before then,
disaster. Well, but an awful lot of it's been a disaster. I'm trying to think of sort of some of the achievements of the last 13 years.
Well, your lot spent all the money. That was part of the problem.
Well, I'm not sure that they did.
They did, because the Chief Secretary of the Treasury left a note saying so. He's called Liam Byrne.
And that was a joke. And Liam Byrne got in the neck for actually leaving a joke for his successor, which should never have been made public, and it was a joke. However, under Labour, under New Labour, you were talking about reducing the debt to 40%. Now we have a debt of 100%.
Well, we did have a pandemic.
Yes, we did have a pandemic, but I mean, the debt was going up before the pandemic started. The point basically is, who do you think is most competent to run the country at the present time? There's also an electoral cycle thing. Maggie Thatcher lasted 13 years, New Labour lasted 13 years. This lot have come to the end of the road.
You think it's end of days?
Yeah.
Feels like it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they just run out of steam.
I do, but I'm so sad that we don't have a choice of anybody else. That's what breaks my heart. Like you said, 13 years with this one, 13 years with that one. But what we need is something new and something true. We need non-career politicians that actually feel for the country and want to do something for the people of Britain.
Would you increase MPs' wages in order to attract better people into politics?
I think MPs' wages should be increased. I think you also should have lived and worked in the real world before you can become an MP. If you're going to be the health minister, then you've got to work within the health system.
Yeah. But why? That's not the way our system works. I mean,
but it should, because our system is broken, Nigel.
No,
it
but the whole
doesn't
thing that they provide political leadership. It's not about expertise. Well, I mean, if you go to a GP, do you think that GP would be better at his job had he been a postman or a miner? And in which case, why should a cabinet minister be a better defence secretary if they've been a doctor?
This week we saw introduced in the Commons the new Labour MP for Selby. He won a by-election. He's 25. I don't want a 25-year-old MP representing me because he or she knows nothing.
Absolutely.
No, but I mean that MP can represent younger people. I mean, the whole point about MPs is they should represent the entire spectrum.
They don't know anything at 25.
Oh, well, I still think that Well, at what age do you become an MP? 40?
Well, why not? 35?
35, 40.
25
You have
is
to.
very young.
You need to have lived a life and to have an understanding of what people are going through.
Yeah.
You know, if you've gone straight from your mum and dad's bedroom to become an MP, how do you know?
A political advisor or something with no real job. Yeah.
We just want to bring you a little bit of breaking news here on GB News this morning. Birmingham City Council has effectively declared bankruptcy by declaring that it needs to stop all but essential spending. We will be looking at that in a little more detail.
Another headache for the Labour Party.
Well, I'm going to say that yet another council. I mean, we're talking about loads of councils. I presume that'll be a section 114, which is where they have to actually freeze spending because they run out of money.
But if we can get people to come in and work, then maybe then they might be able to earn their money.
Point. Britain's second city. How embarrassing is that?
Well, of course it's embarrassing. I mean, we don't know the details about what went wrong here, but we've seen what happened at Woking Council. They thought they could build a kind of Singapore economy in Woking, spent loads of money on property, only bringing in £11 million on council tax, and they were servicing debts of £62 million.
Well, I remind you, during the pandemic, we spent £500 billion of public money to keep people off work where they probably could have gone. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Still to come, there's been a huge victory for people in the North East to do with low-traffic neighbourhoods in Newcastle. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. There is a little bit of mist and fog to watch out for first thing this morning, but once that clears, there'll be plenty of hot sunshine around, although watch out for some strong winds in the southwest. Taking a look at the details, and yes, once any mist and fog clears away, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the bulk of the UK, the exception perhaps being the far north of Scotland, where there is a front lingering here, bringing a bit of cloud and perhaps a few spots of drizzly rain as well. Otherwise, lots of sunshine. Watch out for some strong blustery winds in the southwest. Now, they will take the edge off the temperatures a little bit, but for many it's going to be a little bit hotter than it was yesterday, highs around 31 Celsius towards the southeast. Later on today, we are going to see some low cloud drifting in from the North Sea, so some sea threat affecting parts of eastern Scotland and eastern northeastern England. Low cloud, some murky conditions here. Further south and west, clearer skies, but I am expecting some mist and fog patches to develop. And temperatures, again, not dropping a huge amount, so it's likely to be another relatively warm night for most of us. As we go through Wednesday itself, a slow, murky start then for some eastern, northeastern parts, but that low cloud should gradually burn back towards the coast for most. The exception perhaps around eastern parts of Scotland. I am expecting the low cloud here to linger well into the afternoon. Otherwise, yes, it may be a touch cloudier than some recent days, but plenty of sunshine to be had, and temperatures could be even higher still, with highs around 32 Celsius.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 5th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Birmingham goes bust. Birmingham City Council has just declared itself effectively bankrupt. The local authority has issued a Section 114 notice preventing all but essential spending to protect core services.
Amazing. Low traffic neighbourhoods scrapped. A council in Newcastle has abandoned a scheme designed to reduce traffic and encourage people to take up cycling and walking, deeming it unsuccessful.
Potty-mouthed Keegan, the Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, is fighting to keep her position this morning after swearing after an interview had stopped filming. She was claiming that she'd done a bleeping good job.
Good news for the High Street. Wilko saved some much-needed good news. Rival B&M have snapped up a string of Wilko stores, saving hundreds of jobs. We'll have the very latest next.
So pleased.
Big story in Birmingham, but it's Wilko, great news.
I'm not pleased about Birmingham, to be clear. We're going to be talking to Liam Halligan in just a moment to work out what that means. What does it mean when a council goes bust?
Yeah.
What might it mean for you if you live in Birmingham? But I'm very happy that Wilko's has been saved.
They're great little stores.
Pick and Mix lives to fight another day, which is marvellous news.
Fabulous.
gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. As always, get in touch with us. First, though, Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom.
Bev, good morning. Thank you very much. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Breaking news in the last few minutes. Birmingham City Council has declared bankruptcy. In a statement, the council said it's issued a Section 114 notice as part of plans to meet its financial liabilities relating to equal pay claims. It also said it's got a financial gap within its budget, which currently stands in the region of £87 million. It says it needs to stop all but essential spending. More on this breaking story as we get it. The Education Minister says the government has been very proactive in dealing with the concrete crisis in schools. Speaking to GB News, Nick Gibbs' comments come after the Education Secretary apologised for using strong language whilst expressing her frustration at the way in which the situation has been dealt with. Both Rishi Sunak and Gillian Keegan are under growing pressure as schools across the UK have fully or partially closed. Nick Gibb told us Gillian Keegan's comments were off the cuff.
She was frustrated by the fact that the Department for Education, the civil servants, have been working very hard in terms of dealing with RAC issue. We've been very proactive in dealing with RAC. Since 2018, we've issued very detailed guidance to responsible bodies. And these are the bodies that are legally responsible for school buildings, which are the local authorities, the academy trusts, dioceses, but we provide them with the best advice based on the technical advice that we get about how to identify and monitor RAC.
Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says the Conservatives aren't working hard enough to solve the issue.
I think today, look, when you've got sort of roofs at risk of collapse in various schools across the country, pupils really worried. You've got the Education Secretary expecting to be thanked and congratulated, and parents across the country, teachers who work in schools, and pupils, because some of these pupils are old enough to understand what is going on, want you to fix this and don't want any more of your saying, oh, nothing to do with me, Gov. That is, frankly, an abdication of your responsibilities.
Rishi Sunak has chaired his first cabinet meeting today since before the summer recess. Meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has also been chairing his cabinet meeting this morning. Yesterday saw some big changes within office, with several figures given new roles. Angela Rayner is the new Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and Levelling Up Secretary, and Pat McFadden is National Campaign Coordinator, as well as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Discount retailer B&M has agreed to buy up to 51 Wilko stores from administrators for £13 million. It comes nearly a month after Wilko collapsed, putting thousands of jobs at risk across its 400 stores. Retail sales rose in August as customers spending big on self-care products. Total retail sales in the UK were up 4.1% on last August, above the three-month average of 3.6%. That's according to the British Retail Consortium. Health, beauty, food and drink were the strongest performing categories. Kim Jong-un could travel to Russia to meet President Vladimir Putin. The North Korean leader could make the trip as early as this month, near to the border between the two countries, believed to be a possible meeting point. It comes as the US claims the Kremlin is attempting to acquire military equipment for its war in Ukraine. Offenders are using virtual reality to groom and sexually abuse children, as well as share illegal images of abuse, according to new research from the NSPCC. It warned offenders are being desensitised to their own behaviour because of the anonymity such spaces provide through their use of digital avatars to represent each person present. The NSPCC has called on tech firms to do more to ensure virtual reality platforms are safe by introducing better child safety features and reporting systems. And finally, the hottest temperatures of the year could be seen this week. The Met Office is predicting maximum temperatures of 32 degrees tomorrow and Thursday, potentially matching the year's record during the heatwave in June. It says the UK Health Security Agency issued a yellow alert across the whole of England, apart from the North East, from yesterday afternoon until Sunday night. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, good news if you're a supporter of Wilko. I am. Discount retailer B&M European Value Retail has agreed to buy around 50 Wilko stores from administrators for £13 million. That could save thousands of high street jobs and keep a lot of the branches open. Here to tell us more is our very fine economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. It's good news.
Great news.
It's good news, but let's just hold our horses, because this is an administration negotiation. What does that mean? It means there's lots of assets up for grabs. The administrators, PwC, for Wilko, Their legal obligation is to extract as much money for the creditors of the company as they can. And, of course, you've got loads of buyers with deep pockets who are trying to get the best assets, the best stores, and not buy the stores that they don't want. It's a negotiation, and news is leaking out, claim and counterclaim. There's no real hard headlines here, but it does seem to be moving in the right direction to save at least some jobs. Let's have a look at some of the details. We know that Wilko's got 400 UK stores. You know, a lot of people in the London and the South East are like, what's Wilko? You know, say that to somebody in the Midlands or the North East or Manchester.
Mainstay of my family.
Absolutely.
They love it.
A very popular discounting store. It's got 12,500 employees, lots of part-time jobs, mums and dads trying to make ends meet, kids, students doing work, lots of very important jobs there. It was established by the Wilkinson family back in 1931, but it was put into administration on the 10th of August. What's happening now, and are jobs being saved? We know that the big discount chain B&M, I'd say they're set to buy around 50 stores because this is not yet signed and done and dusted, but they're saying they intend to buy 51 stores.
So 350 would still close.
Which is, well, let's see. Let's see. It's a negotiation. But that is really good news that the company is saying it is set to do this, right? So it's not saying that it's definitely happening.
Right.
A lot of things could happen. The HMV owner, Doug Putman, very high-profile investor, he's also been edging towards a 200-store deal, but there's claim and counterclaim there. Oh, he's not going to buy any. Yes, he's going to buy all of them because there will be a negotiation going on there. And then we know also Pepco, which is the owner of Poundland, they've put in a claim for up to 100 stores, it is said. Another discount retailer, The Range, they want the online operation,
Well, Liam,
they want the brand.
If all these companies are piling and saying they want a bit here and a bit there, this company's obviously got a viable future. Why can't Wilko make it work?
Well, just to say, the administrator has already announced the first redundancies last week, and they were for the central kind of nervous system of the company, the central distribution company or system, all the sort of lawyers that Wilko has. So it seemed from last week that nobody was going to sort of swallow the whole thing and buy the thing whole. Because, Andrew, some stores will be really attractive and be really high turnover and the real estate will be really valuable. But I'm afraid there's no easy way to say this. Some stores, no one thinks they'll be commercially viable, so no one wants to buy them.
Do Wilko own those properties then? They're not leasing them?
No, a lot of those companies they will own. That's why it's valuable. And so it may be...
That's old school, isn't it?
That is old school, but that's why I mentioned specifically in the graphic, they've been around since 1931.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because this is from the Wilkinson family, you know, the Wilkinson sword and all the rest of it. And one of Britain's first discounters. So, look, I am really glad that there are signs that at least some of the stores are going to be saved. In fact, there's very firm signals now that some of the stores are going to be saved. There are other deep-pocketed investors knocking about. They're still in the mix. There's lots of spin and counter-spin going on because everybody involved is trying to get the best possible deal from their point of view.
Do we know what the company is valued at with all of that property?
We don't know what it's valued at, but we do know the 50-odd stores, the number that's been knocking about for those 50-odd stores is about 13 million.
That doesn't sound like a lot.
If you've got 400 stores, if you times that by 8, but of course, which is, 104 million. I know you're good at maths. You will hear a lot of journalists saying it's all saved, because so much TV journalism is about, nothing's going to happen, it's completely dead, and I'm there saying, no, it's not completely dead.
Talking about
something may happen. But now everybody says, it's saved. No, it's not completely saved.
But a bit of it's saved. Quite a lot of it's saved.
This is complex stuff. There are shades of grey. And this is nerve-wracking for people who work at Wilko. And above all, my heart goes out to them.
Of course.
Luckily, you're here to put some nuance where we get quite excited about things.
We do.
But we're not very excited about Birmingham City Council.
We're going to be talking more about this. This is just breaking. So, look, Birmingham, obviously... Britain's second city, though third if you're from Manchester.
Right.
What do people in Manchester say? We're not sure which city is Britain's second city, but it's probably London.
Yes,
very good.
But look, to be serious, Birmingham's Britain's second city. It's the largest local authority in Europe.
Is it really?
It covers a huge area, a huge amount of money. And what's happened is that just in the last hour or so, Birmingham has issued what's called a Section 114 notice. And what that means is that the only payments they're going to be make is essential spending to protect core services. So this is really worrying if you're a contractor to Birmingham City Council, because you may not get paid.
Right.
I mean, and this is a problem. And just a little bit more detail coming through. These pressures have been linked to a £760 million bill to settle equal pay claims. And we've also had such...
things like dinner ladies going back and all that sort of stuff.
And we've also had such notices issued in the past by the likes of Croydon, Thurrock, down in London and the South East, much smaller councils who are within sort of Croydon, at least, within the Greater London Authority.
And are there issues with IT? Because there's often an IT issue with some of these councils that go under.
Didn't they waste a load of money on an IT system in Birmingham that didn't work?
I think pretty much every council... There are for councils in the UK to waste money on IT. But what I would say here is, just as you were standing by the video wall over there before you came to talk to me, I had a look at the gilts market. What's that? That's where the government buys... where people buy government bonds, where the government sells its debt. On this news that Birmingham City Council has issued a 114, a sort of an effective bankruptcy. It's a warning. We've got no money. We've got no money. The assumption is, well, the British government is going to have to bail them out, aren't they?
Which is the taxpayer.
Which is the taxpayer. Everything's the taxpayer.
Yeah.
There is no other money apart from the taxpayer unless you print it, and that's not going very well, is it? So it's really interesting that the gilt yield has spiked. So international investors are going, crikey, this is bad. The British government may have to bail them out unless they can get their house in order. So it's just become a lot more expensive on this news for the British government to borrow money, to pay benefits, to pay for everything across the country as a whole.
And to pay their debt bill.
So this is not just a Birmingham thing. No. It's all interlinked.
What also does it say internationally about Britain that our second city, the biggest local authority in Europe, is about to go under?
Well, you'll remember, Andrew, when we were kids in the 80s, Bev, of course, wasn't born, Orange County in California went bust, and there was this huge row about whether or not that Washington was going to bail them out. New York City's gone bust in the past. Some politicians at the centre think that councils deliberately go bust to throw themselves onto national government for political reasons, because they're spending too much. Oh, just print the money, just find the money, just tax the
government
rich.
or bail us out.
It often becomes a very ideological thing, with the markets looking on, biting their fingernails.
Funnily enough, that ties into our next story. Liam, thank you so much. Liam Halligan there, of course. Now, a council in Newcastle has scrapped a low-traffic neighbourhood, having deemed the scheme unsuccessful.
It was an 18-month trial, and it saw traffic displaced into other streets and failed to encourage members of the public to start walking or take up cycling. Good.
So opponents of the plans have accused the council of going back to a square one. Let's talk now to Alan Miller, face you'll be familiar with, co-founder of the Together Association, joins us now. Alan, I don't know whether you were listening to that conversation with Liam, but it was making me think about councils who are using these traffic schemes in order to generate income, particularly if you are sent a ticket, your penalty, because you're caught in one of these zones you don't know you're going to be there. So just your thoughts on that, first of all, with Birmingham City Council going bust. Well, you've probably got a perspective. Go.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things is that tens of thousands of people in Birmingham, where Birmingham City Council had implemented a clean air zone that people did not say they wanted. And literally tens of thousands of people have not paid. They appealed them, and the appeals have been upheld, which meant that the council's attempt to do a cash grab and to just generate it this way, where the majority of people in Birmingham did not want this, have backfired. And so this is another example of using like impositions and restrictions and attempts to tax further in a way that's unfair, that has not worked. And actually, people with ULEZ and other local low emission zones should take note, and indeed these low traffic neighbourhoods we're coming to discuss about with Newcastle.
And in Glasgow, Alan, they've just worked out that their ultra-low emission zone has actually seen pollution rise by 10%. So it's just the science just isn't working, is it?
That's right, Andrew. I mean, that's over 2 months. It's a recognition that in spite of these claims, in spite of the attempt for, the mayor's office in London and Shirley Rodriguez, his deputy, to try and doctor the actual evidence and get the scientific reports changed, the actual data from taking air particles does not correspond to these zones at all. They should be dispensed with. We should have an open, proper discussion about logistics and transport and clean air, all of those things, and how we want to move forward in a way that can harness our productivity and improve lives for everyone through better housing, better services, and development. And that way is how life has always been improved.
What happened in Newcastle then, Alan? They trialled one of these low traffic neighbourhood schemes and then they've ditched it.
Indeed. So an 18-month trial, Bev, and basically it became very apparent to the council that contrary to the idea that this is going to reduce traffic and or it's going to encourage suddenly this blossoming of everyone cycling everywhere and walking. And I should just say I'm an avid cyclist. I cycle lots of places. I love it. I walk lots of places. But my mum, who has a condition farm, if you're a delivery van driver, you can't just cycle or get on the bus, as David Lammy said. We have a whole diverse society. What happened was that these cars were being pushed into outer areas, on other residential areas, other zones, and doing what always happens with road closures, which is pushing it out to another area, making the traffic go slower, increasing the actual fumes. People are in traffic for longer. And around the country, I mean, fair credit to Newcastle City Council, they did not just double down, which some campaigners want them to do. They said, look, we've had a trial, this has not worked, this has impacted residential areas. Some people are saying, well, actually, the way to counter that is just to get rid of extra cars, that you won't have them spilling out, right? That's the logic is a war on cars and ending of it. And I think we need to have a national conversation that's honest about freedom, about mobility, about transport, logistics, about public transport, about, you know, how we do things and what, you know, the choices we want to make. There's all sorts of technology as well we could be exploring, like tunneling, drones with cars, a whole range all round. But this constant attempt to suffocate and stop mobility and then charge and tax and survey, I think it's a brilliant moment about what's happened in Newcastle, and people should take note across the country. Hackney has 75% of roads they want to have with road closures. It's untenable, it's unacceptable.
It's a Labour council in Newcastle. Yeah. I wouldn't have thought their judgment would be greeted with much elation by Mayor Sadiq Khan down here. He might see it as a betrayal of the Labour policy. Well, funnily enough, I think many people in the Labour Party might think that Sadiq Khan's ULEZ is a betrayal of Labour. I mean, for anyone who can still spell Labour, the idea is for labouring people who work and deliver, and the decent working people of London and our surrounding neighbourhoods and around the country. And whether anyone's Conservative or Labour, the people, the public, the demos are an essential ingredient of our great experiment of the last 300 years. In the modern period, it's the public, it's ordinary people that have shaped things. We need to be much more vocal still and impact locally elected people who don't listen as much. But this is a good moment, and we need to see more challenges, and we need to see this whole issue be addressed in a much more rational way. We need to get rid of the road closure, proper debate, get rid of the low zones, and have a proper transport approach.
Well, Alan, I'll just tell you, you don't need to reply, but David Lammy, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, when he was pressed about the issue of working men and women in the ultra-low emission zone, he was asked, what about plumbers? What about window cleaners? He said, they can travel on the tube. Where's the window cleaner going to put his ladder on a London Underground carriage?
Honestly, Alan,
I can make a suggestion.
Great to see you, and thank you for your hard work on this issue. I think you're doing a great job standing up for British people. Now, in response, Councillor Jane Byrne has said Fenham was the first area of the city to pilot a neighbourhood low-traffic zone trial, and we haven't seen enough evidence to keep it in place, particularly with the displacement of traffic onto what should be quiet residential streets rather than rerouting onto the main roads. As we have said many times, these schemes are trials, which are really important as they allow us to try the changes in local areas and see what works for people living in the zone.
But how dare they reroute traffic from busy roads onto quiet residential streets where kids are playing? How dare
That's
they?
what happens, unfortunately.
And it's just not right.
Don't get
so just mess up everywhere.
Yeah. Right, still to come this morning, the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, Simon Byrne, has resigned after the data breach scandal. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And it's 11:24. You're with Britain's News and on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So it's
Bev Turner. Bev?
Is that my
Bev?
Australian version, Bev? G'day, Bev. Right, it's been 1 week since the expansion of London's ultra-low emissions zone, and some businesses are already feeling the pinch.
They certainly are. Our reporter Lisa Hartle spoke to the owner of a hotel which is just 100 metres inside the area, and she says it's having a huge impact on that business.
West Lodge Park Hotel sits in 35 acres of countryside in North London. It's been a family-run business for 250 years. It's also just 100 metres inside the ULEZ boundaries, which the owner says is having a huge impact.
We've got customers already phoning us and cancelling bookings for both bedrooms and for restaurant and even for conference and banqueting as well. The bedroom customers, if they have a non-ULEZ compliant car, will need to pay an extra £12.50 on check-in and an extra £12.50 on check-out the next morning. So you can do the maths. It doesn't make any sense for them to stay here. They'd choose a hotel outside of London. And then when it comes to future bookings, we don't know what the overall impact will be. But I suspect strongly it'll be in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. I think it's worth saying that everybody is in favour of clean air. So what should have happened was that this would have been brought in with what's called grandfathering. In other words, keep your car, but when you change it, then it should be a cleaner car. And that would be perfectly reasonable. What's happened instead is there's been this cut-off date of the 29th of August, and suddenly everybody is scrambling around like mad, both car drivers and van drivers, trying to find second-hand cars that are compliant.
Many of the staff members don't live in London and don't have cars that comply with the ultra-low emission zone, so they either have to change their cars or pay £12.50 a day. That adds up to at least £250 a month, and as they don't live in London, they're not eligible for compensation through TfL's scrappage scheme.
Some people have actually thought about changing their job because if they're on minimum wage, then it's just too high an expense for the average person, and some of those other people don't live in London either. So it's just literally a cost to come to work.
There is also concern that the ULEZ signs don't make it clear that people may have to pay £12.50 and end up with a £180 fine.
I mean, there's very little signage at all just outside the hotel. There's one small sign, and so I definitely think people will even come into the hotel that won't even be aware that they've gone into the ULEZ zone at all. So I think it's incumbent on us as a hotel to really warn people that they need to check whether they're compliant or not, because some people will not be aware that they've gone into the zone.
The Mayor of London expanded ULEZ in August to tackle air pollution, but with so many costs rising, many businesses like this one are asking, why wasn't more notice or help given to those who need it? Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Isn't that awful? It's It's Barnet. It's sort of North London near Hertfordshire.
But what's your initial reaction when you see that? That is leafy Hertfordshire. It's not London. It's nowhere near the smoke. No. There's very little air pollution out there. And effectively, the Mayor is screwing that business.
We need an away day there, don't you? A GB's away day. Sadiq Khan, of course, has been strongly defending these measures this week, saying that they protect children's health. I thought we had a statement. We don't have a statement. Here he is.
I'm always sorry for anybody who's suffering adverse consequences because of our policies. But at the same time, I've got to be honest with people and say I've been meeting bereaved mums who've lost their children because of air pollution. I've been meeting a paediatrician today who works with mums who are pregnant, suffering the ill consequences because of air pollution, and babies who are born suffering the ill consequences. I've met today a doctor who runs an asthma clinic, but also I visited Great Ormond Street, the inpatient ward at the Children's Evelina Hospital. I met scientists, health practitioners and others. That's why I'm angry that the government's letting down London and the South East.
And this is, just the beginning of his ambitions. I read about this in the Mail yesterday. He's the chairman of a group called C40 Cities. On its agenda is to limit flights, one short-haul flight per person, every 3 years. How does that fit in, Mr Mayor, when last year you went with your officials to Buenos Aires in Argentina, 16,000-mile round trip? What was on the agenda, Bev? Climate change. That went well. Couldn't you have done that on Zoom or on a phone call? It's one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us.
It is, and that's the way it's going. And when he's no longer London Mayor, he will be on this global committee, and he will be, as you say, flying around the world with him and his family. You won't be. We won't be. And that's why this stuff matters. It's really easy to say, well, it's just about driving your car in your neighbourhood. Chill out, Bev, get on a bike. Not about that.
And the other thing, every time I've looked at one of these signs for the ultra-low emission zone, it doesn't say you have to pay £12.50. Here's who you ring. Here's who you register with. It's a mystery tour. So many drivers are not going to realise, and they're going to get whacked with a fine, and if you don't pay it straight away, because you might not know you've been fined, it's £180.
Well, there was already that scaffolder, wasn't there, who claimed back his £11,000 worth of tickets for that very reason. He won in court. So they're batting on a very sticky wicket, these particular councils. Right, we're going to be talking about crumbling schools again in just a moment. Labour have been giving Gillian Keegan a kicking in just the last few moments. We'll tell you why after the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Birmingham City Council has effectively declared bankruptcy. In a statement, the council said it's issued a Section 114 notice which prevents all but essential spending. It says it's part of plans to meet its financial liabilities relating to equal pay claims. The council also says it's facing a financial gap within its budget, currently standing in the region of £87 million. Finances related to protecting vulnerable people and statutory services remain in place. However, all other new spending will cease with immediate effect. The Education Minister says the government has been very proactive in dealing with the concrete crisis in schools. Speaking to GB News, Nick Gibbs' comments come after the Education Secretary apologised for using strong language whilst expressing her frustration at the situation. Both Rishi Sunak and Gillian Keegan are under growing pressure as schools across the UK have fully or partially closed. Rishi Sunak has chaired his first cabinet meeting today since before the summer recess. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has also been chairing his cabinet meeting. Yesterday saw some big changes within office, with several figures given new roles. Angela Rayner is the new Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and Levelling Up Secretary, and Pat McFadden is the National Campaign Coordinator, as well as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. And discount retailer B&M has agreed to buy up to 51 Wilko stores from administrators for £13 million. It comes nearly a month after Wilko collapsed, putting thousands of jobs at risk across its 400 stores. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2558 and €1.1684 euros. The price of gold, £1,538 and 14 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,456 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Britain's crumbling schools coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. There is a little bit of mist and fog to watch out for first thing this morning, but once that clears, there'll be plenty of hot sunshine around, although watch out for some strong winds in the southwest. Taking a look at the details, and yes, once any mist and fog clears away, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the bulk of the UK, the exception perhaps being the far north of Scotland, where there is a front lingering here, bringing a bit of cloud and perhaps a few spots of drizzly rain as well. Otherwise, lots of sunshine. Watch out for some strong blustery winds in the southwest. Now, they will take the edge off the temperatures a little bit, but for many it's going to be a little bit hotter than it was yesterday. Highs around 31 Celsius towards the southeast. Later on today, we are going to see some low cloud drifting in from the North Sea, so some sea threat affecting parts of eastern Scotland and eastern northeastern England. Low cloud, some murky conditions here. Further south and west, clearer skies, but I am expecting some mist and fog patches to develop. And temperatures, again, not dropping a huge amount, so it's likely to be another relatively warm night for most of us. As we go through Wednesday itself, a slow, murky start then for some eastern, northeastern parts, but that low cloud should gradually burn back towards the coast for most. The exception perhaps around eastern parts of Scotland. I am expecting the low cloud here to linger well into the afternoon. Otherwise, yes, it may be a touch cloudier than some recent days, but plenty of sunshine to be had, and temperatures could be even higher still, with highs around 32 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
10:38 with Britain's Newsroom on
11.
GB News. Oh, yes, you're right.
It's flown by.
Flown by. Time. It flies by when you're having such a good time. It is 11:38 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. And back in the studio, by popular acclaim, Tonya Buxton and Nigel Nelson. Nigel Nelson doesn't wear sunblock either.
But he does smoke, so he doesn't care about his smoke.
How many fags have you had since we saw you an hour ago?
2.
I can smell it.
And did you have a vape as well?
No, I left my vape at home, I'm afraid.
So you've had 2 cigarettes in an hour?
You're an adult. I don't mind. You can do what you want in your own time, can't you?
Yeah.
So, right, we've been talking about Gillian Keegan all morning. She's on the front pages of all the papers as the Education Secretary because of the crumbling schools fiasco. Right, so she's been tweeting. Tonya, it's all kicked off, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
This morning between Labour and Gillian Keegan. What's happened?
So she put a tweet out saying most schools unaffected by RAC.
She's right, that we know of.
That we know of, yes. Most schools are unaffected. But then Labour have really, taken the mickey by saying most beachgoers not eaten by big sharks. Now, look, it's funny, and I get the wit in it, and I think whoever's, running Labour's Twitter is really funny and it's great. But there's something in me that gives this sinking feeling that we're just this gutter kind of snipey politics.
Because she was on holiday in Spain last week. She's got a house there. But
Absolutely.
She maintained she was working round the clock from Spain.
But the point is there used to be honour in politics, didn't there? And this kind of sniping, yes, it's funny, and when I first saw it, I went, oh, it's great. But then you think about it and you think, these are our politicians, these are the people that we entrust
They're going to be in government in a few
country.
months' time.
Exactly, and this is what they do.
It sort of started with Trump in a way, didn't it? Using Twitter politically and taking politics down that very personal, that clickbait.
Yes, and I think that what Labour have been doing is they've been trying to make the whole thing funny. And there's no reason why politics shouldn't actually have a bit of fun attached to it.
Not funny if you're a parent that can't go to work, though.
No, but what they're doing is they're not having a go at parents, they're having a go at Gillian Keegan for messing up the whole issue of schools going back to school, basically. So on that front, I think they're right. They have got some of them wrong, if you remember. They had a go at Rishi Sunak with a series of Twitter posts that actually backfired. That didn't work,
wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
saying he endorsed, didn't.
That's right.
Want to lock them up.
That's right. They wouldn't. Yes, and so they got that wrong. What they've been doing with Gillian Keegan ever since her rather unfortunate episode with the hot mic yesterday, they've been putting out stuff which basically is taking the pee out of her. And I think, given what happened, that's perfectly fair. I feel for anybody who might say something down a mic that, as we all do, that's a bit indiscreet. But even so, that she is a cabinet minister. She was saying something that sounded like she was criticising her fellow cabinet ministers for not doing anything.
Do you think she was doing that, though?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Do you? Because I don't know. I slightly read that slightly differently.
I thought she was talking about perhaps one of the previous 9 education secretaries who we've had since this lot got into power. She's the 10th cabinet education secretary since 2010, which in itself is a disgrace because you should be in the job for a lot longer.
See, I
think she was criticising her.
Yeah, reshuffles. There are too many reshuffles.
There's far too many.
Yeah.
You see, I thought she was, and she said afterwards, didn't she? I was talking about the reporter. Maybe she was just covering her own backside at that point.
And then Nick Gibbs says something else. They've been trying to make excuses for it. Either way, that it was critical. As I said, I don't think it's the worst offence ever, but she was just saying what she felt. But
she was frustrated.
Yes, but I don't think that she can actually claim to have done a good job. I mean, this is something that should have been dealt with, a long time ago, but more recently in 2021 and 2022, when the real warnings came out, the schools were about to collapse.
And there is a perception that you shouldn't be abroad on holiday when there is a crisis on your watch, because we saw that with the fall of Kabul. Dominic Raab did not break off his holiday soon enough. There have been many other examples.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say that is politicians do have a right to take a holiday.
They do.
And they can't always actually work out when the holiday will fall within a crisis. So I have a certain sympathy with that. And in fairness to her, she did try and get back, and then couldn't get back immediately because of the air traffic problems.
Does it just demonstrate, Tonya, do you think, though, that children aren't a priority, sadly, in this country, and haven't been for decades, really? Politicians kicked it into the long grass. Every subsequent cohort of MPs has sort of thought this is someone else's problem.
Our children have been thrown under the bus again and again, whether it be with their school buildings, with their education, which we know, lockdowns, we know what lockdowns did to our children. Nobody seems to care about our children. Thank goodness for people like Molly at Us for Them, who are kind of putting children in the forefront again, because our children are, we've got a tsunami of mental health going on, and it's our kids are going through it, and these are going to be the adults of the future, and we're not doing anything to support them.
It does feel like that, doesn't it? One school that is doing something to support kids. I love this story, Tonya. This is about the school in London, which has introduced in Hackney boxing onto the curriculum. Some people will hate this. It goes against the idea that everything's got to be safe. We've got to keep them safe. What are they doing?
Well, what they're doing here, which is really good, is there's a lot of children that are kind of being excluded from mainstream schools, and they all get this label of ADHD. In my day, it was called hyperactivity. Both my brothers were hyperactive, allegedly, but they didn't need to get excluded from school. And what they're doing is they're introducing 40 minutes of boxing a day, which teaches children discipline.
Is this in the physical education spot?
It must be in the physical education spot. They're doing everything else. They're doing all the other subjects, GCSE, maths, science, English, PE, all of that. No, actually, PE is a different subject, so it's an extracurricular. But what I found was really interesting is that, the head teacher there, Anna Kane, basically said it's to use boxing, the discipline, the focus, the self-reliance that you have to teach young people who are often angry and have had terrible experiences that are vulnerable, how to kind of use their emotions. And I thought this quote from an ex-pupil really said it all. It said, if you go into the boxing ring angry, you'll get knocked out. If you go into society angry, you'll get knocked out. Thoughtful words are the ammunition you need. So it makes children have to discipline their emotions and their feelings when they're in the ring, and it also makes it translate into actual life.
And it's also, when I was growing up, it was a traditional route for kids from poorer backgrounds to channel their frustrations, their energies in the boxing ring, and if they became an accomplished boxer, help them escape From the poverty they were living in.
Not necessarily from poverty, but my son last year, at 17 years old, was British national boxing champion for his age.
Good on him.
So and we put him into boxing because he was quite shy, timid.
Yeah.
And we put him into boxing about 8, 9 years old because I was worried about what he'd be like once he went to secondary school. So I had fear that he'd be bullied.
Yeah.
And what boxing did is it gave him this inner confidence. He's not a troublemaker. He's, like I said, he was shy and timid, but it gave him this air of security, which has really helped him throughout all his life.
Good.
And he comes from a secure, stable background.
Yeah.
So I'm saying children that don't come from that background, it can help them as well.
Is he still boxing?
Oh, he's gone into MMA now. Don't talk to me.
He's gone into a different type of fight, mixed martial arts.
Oh.
Terrible.
But this, for me, this story, I think, Nigel, is about having a great head. It comes down to the heads of the schools, doesn't it? Making decisions which are brave and might be a little bit counter.
Yes, all those things. Yeah, all those things that actually sort of thinking differently about how you deal with problems. I mean, I went to somewhere similar with David Lammy in his constituency, where he had a youth club which does
Tottenham, of course,
in Tottenham, and does exactly the same thing. That kids were taught to box, and these kids were taken off the streets where they'd been violent, and the violence was then channeled into boxing, so they could learn all the things that we're talking about here. Discipline, how to actually deal with yourself, how to hold yourself, and so on. And so I think that I hate boxing, but I do think this works.
I agree. I think it's a terrific idea.
Yeah. Do you know the unofficial school motto is a quote from Mike Tyson, which is, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. That's the school motto, which is brilliant. Pretty true. But the little scallies that will be there that are probably so full of potential, I think that is just a wonderful story.
And often for black children in some of our inner cities, boxing again is a great route for them. And you look at some of our Olympians and
it's where you can go with it. I mean, it may well be they'll take it up as a sport. Anyone who's any good at it, absolutely.
I think it's great stuff. I would have been hopeless at boxing, I must say.
Can we talk about Prince Andrew and the fact that this Freedom of Information Act, courtesy of a particular author who's writing about him, and the royal family have said you can't have this information, Nigel, for how many years?
Well, I mean, until 2065, when Andrew would be 105 by that time.
I don't think he'll be with us then.
Probably not.
But this is Tony Blair. He excluded the royal family from the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act.
Yes, he did, and also these particular documents are locked up. Andrew Lowney, the author who's trying to get his hands on them, he's been trying to write a biography of Lord Mountbatten, and especially the affair Lady Mountbatten had in India.
India.
And all those things are locked up. He's had trouble getting hold of those. Who's an expert when it comes to this. I mean, all I would say here is, what we don't know is, of course, why they've been locked up. We don't know. It is quite understandable that you have secrets kept for a long time. So, for instance, in Northern Ireland, if you've been a British agent, your file is closed forever because that was the condition that you would work for the British. Otherwise, your family in the future would be... That's right. It protects your future family. So in this particular case, there won't be anything like that.
Well, they were asking for knowledge about the trips that Andrew made in the 10 years as a taxpayer-funded trade envoy. This is request to the Foreign Office, Tonya. So why would the royal family not give information about the trips that he made? Where might he have been going that they don't want us to know about?
Well, it's also, it's got to do with his association with Jeffrey Epstein, and I do feel that it is in the public interest for us to know what he was up to. I mean, you can't have the royal family that had this kind of culture of secrecy about them anymore, because they're not the Queen.
Well,
let's just say they're not the Queen. The Queen was someone that, you felt that if you asked anything of her, everything would have been above board. Unfortunately, with the royal family now, that's not the case.
I suspect what's happening, I don't know, because I've written about this family for many years, I suspect it's a precedent they don't want to set. If they agree...
I thought that.
Then who's next?
Yeah, so the floodgates open.
Is it Camilla, the Queen Consort, the current Queen? And ironically, I remember Blair would tell you one of his greatest achievements as Prime Minister was bringing in same-sex civil partnerships, which I'm a beneficiary, and he says one of his biggest regrets was bringing in the freedom of information.
Yeah, he realised...
Astonishing thing for a Labour Prime Minister to regret doing.
Yes, but I mean, he actually realised that the whole thing turned into a complete disaster.
Yeah.
Because the problem works both ways.
Yeah.
You have a problem if you don't release stuff, because now we're saying, well, hang on, we're meant to have it. Then there's material being released which actually shouldn't be released, genuinely, because for national security reasons, it actually gets out. And it's very difficult getting the balance. But you're right, Tony Blair always said it was his greatest regret as Prime Minister.
It is extraordinary, isn't it?
There must be a caveat. When it's the security of the country,
Yeah.
then obviously there is a caveat, like you said, in Northern Ireland. But when it comes to the comings and goings, you've got someone like Prince Harry, who's basically...
funded trips.
Taxpayer-funded
Yeah, they were.
Basically, he's revealing all for financial gain, and we can't find out the truth because it's...
I went on one of those trips with Prince Andrew when I was on the Telegraph to write about his role as trade ambassador. He stayed in the best hotels in Singapore. I was at the back of the blimmin' plane, Singapore. His nibs was at the front, of course. And do you know what? Not only did he take his equerries and all this, he took his battered ironing board with him. Went everywhere around the world with him.
Oh, don't be ridiculous.
It did.
No.
And I said,
no.
Do you use it then? No. His equerry has to use that ironing board. It goes everywhere around the world with him. That would be interesting in the free.
Well, it would. Why? Why?
What is it about your ironing board?
And we're paying a seat. Like, what does he do with his ironing board?
That has to go in the hole. That has to go in the hole.
Maybe some security blanket.
The hotel was pretty smart, and let me tell you, there was staff to do the ironing. Not in my room.
Presumably
he was in a suite.
Still does that? Do you think he still takes his
I'm
ironing
sure he
board?
does, except he doesn't travel anywhere now. But I suspect when he goes to Balmoral, which is about the only part he's allowed to go to, I suspect his ironing board's in the back seat.
The ironing board will be there.
If you see part of an ironing board sticking out, you'll know why.
I wonder if it has a name.
Yes.
That's the most... Do you know what? I've heard you say some extraordinary things while I've been sat next to Andrew Pierce, but I think you've just been...
I saw the ironing board. I said, what's that hideous old thing in the corner? Silence in the room. They said, that's Sir's ironing board. It goes everywhere with him.
Well, I'm sorry. If you're so indulged that nobody around you can say to you, listen, Andrew, leave your ironing board at home. We can probably find one in the hotel.
Yeah.
If you're that indulged, then no wonder you get yourself into
Do you think he's ever used it?
Never. Never, 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 never.
Well, I'm speechless, frankly.
There we are.
You maybe want to go home and do the ironing.
Yeah.
Right, I think we are pretty much done for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
For coming in. Tonya Buxton. You
way.
look fabulous after
thank
your
you.
Greek holiday, Tonya.
Thank you.
Just apologies to those viewers who might have tuned in earlier and thought Tonya Buxton was naked because the strap was covering up your pink dress.
Nigel, you would.
Thank you very much.
Are you going to go and have another cigarette now?
I am.
Of course you are.
I am.
Right, we will be back tomorrow. That is it for Britain's Newsroom today. Up next, it's the live desk with Mark Longhurst and Pip Thompson. Mark is here to tell us what's coming up today, Mark.
Well, are more cracks appearing in the government's facade? Schools Minister Nick Gibb now confirming that Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, had refused to build 200 crumbling schools. And it's despite, of course, Sunak saying it was completely and utterly wrong to blame him. Is Birmingham bust? The City Council asking for urgent help with the debts now heading towards £1 billion. But will a Labour government or Labour authority be bailed out by the government? And we're on the beach in Devon as we're set to outstrip Ibiza, Athens and Los Angeles. But we are asking, is it too hot to handle for some? All that coming up in a moment.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. There is a little bit of mist and fog to watch out for first thing this morning, but once that clears, there'll be plenty of hot sunshine around, although watch out for some strong winds in the southwest. Taking a look at the details, and yes, once any mist and fog clears away, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the bulk of the UK, the exception perhaps being the far north of Scotland, where there is a front lingering here,